Ni hao, Ken folks. This is your guy JEM, and today we are talking part two, ACES workflow. So we got a lot of ground to cover here. This is going to be a rather lengthy workshop. So first thing I'll say is if you don't know what ACES is, you need to go back and watch part one of my ACES explainer. So you'll see a link up top, or you'll see a link down below in the comments. Go to that link and you can watch the video on what ACES is. Today we're going to talk workflow. We're going to cover starting in DaVinci. We're going to cover Blender, Maya, Fusion, and After Effects. And all of this is going to be done from the aspect of a working independent filmmaker, how to get your stuff done. I'm going to explain to you how to set up ACES in your projects, but I'm also, where I can, going to drop some tips and tricks on it for you, okay? So let's dive right into it. So the first thing we're going to do, as I said, is we're going to start in DaVinci, okay? Now, if you're coming over from Premiere, as we talked about in part one, a lot of you guys use Premiere, a lot of you guys are using Final Cut Pro. What you need to do is export your projects out and conform your projects, typically using the Final Cut Pro XML workflow, okay? So once you've got your finished product, your locked edit, and you've got that, you can transfer it over to DaVinci, or if you guys are good enough in DaVinci, you can certainly edit in DaVinci. But once you've got it over in DaVinci, and for finishing, this is where we're going to do, and this is where we're going to start with ACES. So we've got our camera. What you'll see here is we've got some camera originals here, okay? And so this is all camera original footage, but the first thing I want to do in DaVinci is I want to set my project up for ACES, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in my project settings. I'm going to go down to color management, and color management, I'm going to set up the following things. I'm going to set my color space to ACESCG, okay, and you'll see it here. You don't want to use ACESCG. We want to use ACESCG, okay. We want to use ACES, we don't want to identify what our ACES version is. So that's the version of ACES that you have currently on your computer. Now, DaVinci comes with ACES installed, so you're going to get the latest version of ACES in that package. But, however, if you're using something like After Effects, or you're using some other program where you've got to use the open color IO configuration file, you got to download that. And like I said, if you don't know what that is, go back to part one, read in part one, we'll describe to you what that is. But if you're using an open color config file in another program, you want to stay in that form of ACES here in DaVinci. So for instance, if you've downloaded 1.1 in After Effects, you want to choose 1.1 here, okay? You don't want to work in 1.2. There's really not too much of a difference, but just to stay consistent, so you get the same transforms across your workflow, you want to stay in that same version of ACES. Now, I'm working 1.2 across the board, so I'm going to choose 1.2. Like I said, you can choose any transform you want to do. Okay, the next important thing is we're going to go to the ACES output device transform, okay? Now, a lot of people will tell you to put in the input device transform. I'm going to tell you right here, don't set your project up with a defined input transform. We're going to choose our input transforms depending on the footage that we have brought in. Now, if you're doing a totally, say, Red show, or you're doing a total Sony show, or you're doing a total Panasonic show, and you know that your camera, you're going to use one camera system across that show, you can go ahead and put that input transform in. Go for it, okay? But if you're going to have some mixed footage, you're going to bring in stock footage, you're going to bring in any type of footage that's not going to be off the same camera system, I'd strongly recommend don't put an input transform here. Leave that blank, okay? Now for output transform, we're going to go with Rec 709 because the first thing we want to do is grade our show for SDR. Okay, so we're going to set up our show, grade it for SDR. Now, if you're grading for HDR, you're grading for some other platform, you could change this and set this up. Now, very important, if you're going to change this, make sure that the monitor that you have you can see that output. So in other words, if your monitor cannot support Rec 2020, your monitor cannot support P3, don't dial this in as your output device transform because you won't be able to grade it. You won't be able to see the total range of color and what's happening as you grade the colors. Okay. Now, a lot of people will say, hey, I have a sRGB monitor. I can do Rec 709. Yes, you can, but I would strongly recommend that you go out and you find a cheap, affordable Rec 100% Rec 709 monitor. There are dozens out there. Right off the top of my head, you have the ACES brand, the Pro Art series. I think they're like $300. Really easy to acquire. You also have LG, you have BenQ. All of these monitor manufacturers will support and provide cheap, affordable Rec 709, 100% Rec 709 monitors. Go grab one of those, use that as your output reference monitor, and you should be just fine. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to process nodes. I'm going to process my LUTs in ACES CCT AP1. Okay, now that's not a super important thing, but we're going to set it up for that. Once you've done that, you should be set. Everything here should be fine. You shouldn't need to touch anything else going on here. Now, the only other thing I would stress to you, just a real good check is just make sure, okay? Make sure that down here where it says broadcast safe, make sure that make broadcast safe is not checked, okay? Make sure this is not enabled, okay? Because that's gonna choke your colors, okay? That's gonna choke your colors to a broadcast safe level. You don't want to do that, okay? So once you've done all that, you should be set up. Everything should be fine. Your project should be set up for you to start an ACES, okay? So the next thing we have here is what I did is I inputted a variety of different types of footage, okay? So here I've got some red footage, courtesy of myself and also courtesy of the wonderful guys over at Raw Film. So if you haven't checked those guys out, they have some great red footage that you can download for free. And then they also have a good supply of red footage that you can purchase for your projects, like commercial projects and stuff like that. So here we have some 8K red footage. Next, we've got some Canon C300 footage. This is Canon Log C300. Then next up, I have some H.264 footage that I acquired. I can't remember, I can't remember where I got it from. It's stock footage that I have. I don't remember if I shot it or I don't remember if I got it from someone else. But it helps here because and we'll see it. We'll talk about that in a second, why this is important in this timeline. Next, Panasonic GH5 footage, and this is shot in Vlog. Another set of H.264 footage. Once again, don't know where I got it from. So we've got a pretty good offset of different cameras, different types of footage, and we can see what we got here. Also, I also forgot, I've got some Canon 7D footage also in here, okay? So real quick, now this is the important thing about working in ACES in DaVinci, especially version 17. In version 17, you load in that raw footage, whether it be from Red, Ari, Canon, Blackmagic, whatever. As long as it's raw footage, you can load it in and DaVinci will automatically automatically detect what type of footage it is and automatically set it up. So as you can see here now, this is not in log. This doesn't look raw. This doesn't have the log footage. This is already had. This is already had an ACES input transform has been applied to it upon loading it into the bin. Okay, and the way you can check it is if you right click here and you look, you don't see the ACES input transform is not available for you to choose because it's already interpreted what type of footage. And you can see over here, it's going to give you on the clip details, it's going to tell you can read it as red helium film, and ACES knows, okay, and DaVinci knows, okay. So keep that in mind. Raw footage, it automatically reads it. Now, if we go over to this C300 footage, which was log footage, it's not raw, but it's log footage that I shot, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago for the initial film that I did with Nina Blue. So I inputted it in here, but DaVinci didn't pick it up. It didn't pick it up as footage that we could pick up. So here you see ACES input transform has showed up. Now all we need to do is kind of identify what camera it was, what camera it was, and choose the input transform. So here I know we shot it on Canon C300. It was a tungsten. It was balanced for tungsten. So I'm going to choose that. Bingo. And as you can see here now, it's already kind of set it up. Okay. Got some more C300 footage here. So I'm going to go ACES input transform C300. Okay. And it's as simple as that. It's really as easy as that. Okay. Now I'm going to go over here. I've got some GH5 footage that I shot. Okay. I'm going to go to ACES here, ACES input transform. Okay. Now, as you can, you know, I don't know if you guys can see this, but there isn't a Panasonic for the Panasonic input transform for the GH5. Okay, the one you see here is Panasonic, the V35. Now we could pick that curve, but if you dive down a little closer, right down to the bottom, I don't know if you guys can see this, you'll see one that says Panasonic VariCam V-Log Gamut. So I'm going to choose that. I'm going to choose the V-Log Gamut. Bingo. Okay. Comes in, looks outstanding. Now, why am I doing this? Why would this be advantageous? Well, in one click, I'm actually turn the footage into how I saw it in the viewfinder. One click. I don't have to get in there and start messing with curves. I don't have to change things. I don't have to kind of guess and go in and balance my footage. I don't have to do anything like that. Now, what is important to understand is I'm not applying LUTs. These are not LUTs that I'm applying. I'm applying the camera input transform. So what your camera saw, I'm going through that process. This is not a LUT. So I'm not compressing anything. I'm not changing anything. All I'm doing is applying the color science that was used by Panasonic to that clip. Okay. Now what happens if you get footage that you don't know what the camera was? You're not sure what the camera was. You're not sure where it came from. You're not sure how it was shot, so on and so forth. Now, is it okay for you to apply different transforms? Yes, it is. So here I have some H.264 footage. I'm going to go to ACES input transform, and I am going, I don't know what camera it is, so I can't pick a camera system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to guess and say, okay, 9 times out of 10, this footage was probably shot on a camera system that was balanced for Rec 709. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to choose Rec 709. Okay, now we see the footage. It looks a little bit better. Doesn't have the log look to it. Now, but what if I wanted to go ahead and try another input and just see how that worked? Okay, so I'm going to go and I'm actually going to pick Rec 2020, larger camera space, and let's see how that works. Okay, now as you can see, it infused a lot more color because the curve on it just let me use a larger color space. Now, 9 times out of 10, This is not the color space. This is not what, you know, that's Rec 2020. I doubt seriously it was shot in a camera system for Rec 2020. Let's go back and kind of take it back to Rec 709, and we'll work with that, okay? Now, once we got all our clips balanced, now, can you choose a series of clips? So could I go and like grab a bunch of clips and then do the ACES input transform? Sure can. So if I have a bunch of clips in a folder, I know they're all the same transform. All I have to do is go hit them and put the input transform on. So once I have all my input transforms on, then I'm ready to do color work, okay? Now, before we start in with the color work, what I want to do is give a huge shout out to my guy Dado Valenti and a guy by the name of Joshua Pines, man, because they are where you're hearing a lot of this from me is from me compiling that information from those guys. So I want to make sure I give those guys a huge shout out because they are the kind of leaders. Joshua's a leader on a lot of big films. He's helped set the standard for a lot of big film ACES work. Dado was one of the first ones to use and implement ACES on a big, huge film. So definitely want to give those guys. And if you want to know more, certainly, man, watch my channel, like, subscribe, hit the notification bar. But if you want to deep dive more into DaVinci color science, working with DaVinci, by all means, jump over. It's called Color Training. Dado's whole site. He has courses. Take all of that, man. I want to give him all credit because I'm about to drop some tips and tricks on you right now that I can't take credit for. I have to give credit to him because this came straight from those guys. Okay, so enough with that. Now we're back into actually working with ACES, and I'm going to show you guys how to do a workaround here on something that you'll find once you start working at ACES. So once you start and begin to work at ACES, you're going to notice one thing. So when you start working at ACES and you have your normal lift, gamma, gain, and you see over here where I'm at, once you start working in it, you're going to notice something really fast. The first thing you're going to notice is that once you start working with the lift, gamma, gain, you're going to get a problem here. And what's the problem? The problem is that your lift, gamma, gain all kind of responds like gamma. So you're working the wheels and you're seeing, okay, my lift acts like gamma. And if you guys can see what's happening over here, my lift is acting like gamma, okay? And my gain is acting like gamma, okay? Well, that's a problem, okay? Or it may not be such a problem as it is a nuisance and it makes it hard to work, okay? So the first little tips and trick thing we're going to do here is we're going to fix that. We're going to fix it so your lift, gamma, gain will operate the way they're supposed to. Okay, so the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go here. I got my node. I'm going to set up a new node, okay? And what I want to do is I want to transfer. I want to take that node and we're going to convert the color space into something where the lift, gamma, gain will operate the way you're used to them operating. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop an ACES transform on there. Okay, so that ACES transform, I'm going to go here. I got ACES version 1.2. That's what I'm working in. I got my input transform, which is ACESCG. So I'm going to go get ACESCG. Okay. All right, so here's my ACESCG. Don't worry about the image changing. And I'm going to go to my output, and I'm going to change that output to Rec 709. Now, why did I go to Rec 709? I went to Rec 709 because that's my output. That's what I'm taking things to. Okay, so now I'm going to drop another node. Okay, and we're going to use this node as our primary. This is where we're going to do some of our work. We're going to do our primary grade in, okay? All right, so we're going to leave that alone for right now. And then I'm going to drop another node, and I'm going to call this my output, okay? I'm going to take another ACES transform, drop that down. I'm working on 1.2. Okay, I was working in Rec 709 space. That's what I'm doing my primary in, Rec 709. Okay, but now I want to come back out to CCT. All right, so if you look at the image, exactly the same as it was here in our primary input. Okay, so what did I do? I took my image, transformed it into Rec 709 space. So right here, I'm working in Rec 709. And then I came back out to CCT. All right. Now, so I'm going to drop a label on this real quick, just so you guys know, can remember. So we're going to call this input. And I'm going to call this primary. And I'm going to call this output. Okay. Now, as I said, this is all about the ability to be able to go into here and have your lift, gamma, gain respond normally. So let's try it out. Let's see what happens. Okay. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to give myself a little. I'm going to pull down the lift. Okay. And I'm going to increase my gain just a bit. Okay. And as you can see, it is responding exactly the way you're used to. The color wheels are responding exactly the way you're used to. So you're getting what you're used to as far as performance, right? You're not getting it's not all moving like gamma, because this was how gamma would do it, right? And that's what we were getting before. But now you're getting the performance you were used to. Okay, so I can do my primary grade here. Now the question is, okay, once I get in my secondaries, qualifiers, power windows, do I have to do it all here? You could operate here, or you could do, once you've got that established, you can come back out into ACES space and you could work here. So theoretically, you could do everything that you're doing, everything else, secondaries, specific color space, isolation of color. You could do all of that here and then, build upon that. All this does is allow you to work with your primary grade in your Rec 709 color space, what you're used to, and have the color wheels respond the way you want them to respond. Pretty simple, okay? Now, do you need to go through that workflow for your HDR? No. But if you're doing SDR right now in ACES, this is a good workaround. Now, you can keep it and do what you did before, but this is a good workaround for you. So now another tip and trick is that for you guys who are doing film inhalation at the end, you want to take this out the film in ACES. Then you can kind of dive in at that point and start adding things like neon suppression. The other thing I would suggest, and lastly for film setup, there is a wonderful set of tools by a guy by the name of Paul Dior, and I'll actually put the link to his conversation on ACES Central, which if you're serious about working on ACES, you definitely want to join over at ACES Central. He makes a wonderful set of tools for you guys who like to use LUTs. Now, I will tell you this stuff, guys. You cannot use LUTs in ACES. So you can't drop a LUT in ACES to kind of get that conform to whatever film or colors emulation that you want to get. What you can use is what's called DCTLs. Okay, you can use those. Okay, while they aren't LUTs, they're actually plugins that will help you to get some of the same similar looks that you're looking for. So if you go over to ACES Central, Paul Dior has a wonderful set of DCTLs, different plugins that you can use. Okay, so you can go here. You'll see some of the plugins that are available right now from his set of plugins that you have. They're totally free. You can go to his GitHub. I'll put the link down there for you guys. So I can drop a film grade here, okay, and introduce some grain, okay, and kind of mimic a film look, okay? And there's some other tools that you can use that do the same thing, okay? This is how you set up ACES. This is how you work with ACES workflow inside of your DaVinci system for finishing. Certainly not going to get into color grading with you guys and stuff. I can do that, but that's another course. So we're gonna leave you here with this color grading. Now, the last tips and tricks that I want to talk about in DaVinci is something called NAMs and GAMs, and this is specific for. Reason I'm telling you this is specific for visual effects handoff. Okay, so if you have a shot, okay, which is a visual effects shot, and you've decided, okay, I need to output this shot for visual effects. So let's take this shot here, okay, and this is another part. This actually can be considered part of my Netflix series. And when I talk about things for handoff to Netflix, because specifically what I'm talking about here is a Netflix requirement. Okay, so there's a Netflix requirement that you do a GAM, what's called a graded archive master. So this is ACES and DaVinci. Okay, part 2, workflow. Hope you guys learned a lot. Next, we are going to move to Blender. We're going to follow a VFX pipeline. We're going to get that done, and we're going to move on to Blender right now. Okay, we're over in Blender now, and as you guys can see, I'm rocking 2.92.0. Okay, so that's the Blender version I'm working in right now. In an attempt to kind of speed this up, guys, I've already preloaded a model into Blender. It's an acacia tree, kind of highly detailed. It's a big poly number, but we'll work with it. And if you guys don't know how to import things into Blender, we're not going to cover that right now. We're specifically going to deal with getting ACES right in your system. So the very first thing that you want to do in Blender is make sure that you've got the OCIO configuration files loaded onto your machine where Blender can find them. So the very first thing we're going to do in order to ensure, to take a look and make sure that that's what we have, is we're going to go over to the side here. I'm in the layout. We're going to go into the side, over in the side here. I'm going to click Render Properties, and I'm going to go all the way down to Color Management. Okay? So once I get down to Color Management, I see something that says ACES. That tells me that ACES is actually, the ACES configuration is actually on my machine. Okay, so my display device is ACES, and my sequence is ACES. So just like before, just like we talked about in Resolve, you want to set your view transform, which is what your monitor, the color space your monitor is working in. You want to set that color space, that view transform. We want to set it for whatever your monitor is. So right now, our monitor is, we're going to change this to Rec 709. So that's what we're going to change this to. My monitor that I'm rocking here, the ASUS, I think it's the 2780 that I'm rocking here on this display. That is set up 100% Rec 709. So I'm going to get a good picture. I'm going to see what my textures look like and what my lighting on the tree is going to look like. So I've got that view transform set for Rec 709. My display device is set up for ACES because I have the configuration files loaded on my system. Now, what if I don't have those configuration files set up? What do I do then? Okay, so what you want to do is, you first and foremost close out of Blender. So you're going to close Blender. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to go to that Sony open config, Sony open IO configuration site, or the GitHub associated with it, and we're going to find those files. So you're going to download those files, and all we're going to do is we're going to go find our Blender data files folder. Okay, so that's going to be Blender, the number you're using. So if you're using 2.92 like I am, it would be 2.92. Then you're going to see 2.92 as far as the folder, and then you're going to see data files. You're going to go inside of data files, and you'll see a folder here that says color management. You're going to double click that, and if you do not have ACES loaded, all of this will be blank. There'll be nothing in this folder. So then what you want to do is go in and load. You want to actually go in and load that configuration file into your system here. So everything that would be in, say, like 1.2. So everything that you found inside of 1.2 or 1.01 or 0.3, whatever you found in that version of ACES that you downloaded, you want to put in here. Once you put it inside of there, then it should show up in your Blender file. So if you haven't done that, that's what you want to do. Okay. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to take ourselves back to Blender. So like I said, once you've done that, restart Blender. This should show up. Go in your render properties, look down, you should see all that stuff. Set it up for your monitor, and then what outcome? The outcome that you're looking for pretty much always should be ACES, ACESCG. Now, I know in Resolve, we worked in CCT. When you're doing visual effects and you're working in visual effects, computer graphics, whatever, you want to set your transform for ACESCG. Okay, I know some people out there that use ACESCC. I would strongly recommend you stay with ACESCG, okay? Because it's going to give you the widest color space to be able to take your 3D model and your 3D lighting, okay? And it works best with most renderers out there. Okay, so we're done with that. Now, the one major thing that you have to understand when you're working in a 3D program, in a CG program, is that everything that you use to texture, any color file that you use inside of that CG program needs to be set up for ACES. Okay, and I'll show you what I mean right now. Okay, so first thing first, right? We're gonna light our scene. So most likely, most of the time, we all use HDR files. So what I did is I preloaded an HDR file into the scene. Okay, so it looks pretty good. The only problem is that it's wrong. Okay, and I'll show you why it's wrong. The file itself is like we imported the file, okay, correctly. So if you know how to do the environment background real quick, we'll set that up so you can kind of go in, okay, and load up your HDR file. Okay, so you want to go into your world properties, environment background, so on and so forth, and set that up. And if you need help with that, there's plenty of tutorials that can help you with that. I'm not really a Blender guy. Took me a little bit to figure it out, but we got it. Okay, so we get an HDR file loaded in. Okay, so immediately what's going to happen is that HDR file is going to come in, and here's our shading network for the HDR, not for the tree, but for the HDR background in the back. Now, if you look closely here, okay, and we'll scroll up a little bit. Okay, so if you look closely here, you'll see that it automatically came in as ACESCG. And that's what gave us the look that we see here. Now, if I change that, let's say I change that to anything here. I'm going to change this to red linear. So I'm going to go ahead and change this file and how it's interpreted, okay? And you'll see it change. Give it about a second. Okay. So I've put a Rec 709, G18 Rec 709 on there, input on there. And as you can see, it's actually doing some wonky stuff. The color has changed. It's a lot darker, okay? Because that import transform is affecting, the input transform is affecting the color space of the image. Now, this is an HDR file, which means it's already linear, all right? So it's already a linear file. So what I want to do is I want to read this I want to tell Blender that this is a linear file that needs to be put into ACES space. So how do I do that? Okay, so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use an input transform called utility linear sRGB. Okay, because even though this is a linear HDR file, right? It was still captured with a camera, and the camera's world space that it was captured in was sRGB. Okay, so it's always going to be sRG space. Okay, now we're going to come into a little problem here with the way Blender works with ACES things. As you can see here, there's a ton. I believe someone counted it was like 380 or 324 input transforms that are available here. Now, currently right now, they don't have a way to make those transforms smaller. So what you have to do is you've got to zoom out on your shading network, make your shading network smaller, and that allows you access all the way to the left here where you can grab what you're looking for. So what we're looking for here is utility linear, okay? We're looking for utility linear texture, okay? Okay, so utility linear sRGB, that's the one we're looking for, okay? So we're gonna highlight that, boom. Okay, our transform has changed, okay? So you see our HDR file. Now it doesn't look as saturated in color, and it's in ACES space now. It's in ACES working space now. So that means the light that is going to bounce off, the light that's going to be used by that's going to be used by the engine to light the scene is going to be an ACES space, okay? And that's going to do wonders for your 3D model, okay? Now let's go to the 3D model. So we've done that. We've got our shading network here taken care of. We're in utility linear space. Okay, we're all set. Okay. So now we're going to go and we're going to jump into shading the model. Okay. So I'm going to take a couple textures. Okay, I'm going to jump back over there. Object. And let's start with our trunk mat, or let's start with our bark. Okay. All right. So we're going to take our bark, pull up our textures. Okay. All right. So I've got our bark here. So I'm going to grab my JPEG file, drop that in. Okay. And while I'm at it, I'm going to drop my normal map in. Okay. All right. So okay. So get a little room here. Okay. So the color map is the same. You're going to treat this the same as we did the HDR map. We're going to treat it the same as we do our color in DaVinci. Okay. We're going to wire this up, color to color, right? And as you can see now, the bark on the tree shows up. But now we've got to deal with the space. We've got to deal with that space. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to change our space. We're going to take our space and we're going to change it. And we're going to change it to, what we can use to normalize it, right? So this is a JPEG file, okay, done in sRGB. So we know that. We know it's a JPEG file, sRGB. That means it's not a linear file. It hasn't been linearized, okay? So it's not a linear file, and it needs to become a linear file. We need to convert it into a higher color space, okay? Because if you look here, and you kind of look at the branches and how it looks, it looks kind of sapped of life. It doesn't really look the way we want it to look, okay? So we're going to go here. We're going to find our utility. Now, as you can see here, guys, we don't have the full gamut because we need to kind of zoom out. And unfortunately, it's a price you pay right now playing with Blender. Okay, so we've kind of pulled out a little bit. So if you look real down, and it takes a little bit here, I'm going to look for utility sRGB texture. So that's what I'm looking for. So I snap that into utility sRGB. Okay. All right, let me pull this. I'm going to pull this and open it up a little bit. So you see utility sRGB texture. That's what we're looking for. Okay. And as you can see here, you can kind of see the color in the branches has kind of come back a little bit. And that's what we want. Okay. Now we're moving over to the map. Okay. So once we get in the map, we're going to do the same thing, except here's the difference in the map in what we're doing here. This is a normal map, so it doesn't use color information to do what it does, right? It deals with black and white. It deals with lightness and darkness, okay? So more luminance than actual use of color, of sRGB. So we're not going to interpret it as sRGB. We're going to interpret it basically for what it is. Now, there's a couple different ways of doing this. Some people like to use one method. Some people like to use another. The main thing you want to do is you don't want to convert this file. You do not want to move this file into ACES. You don't have to, okay? We're just dealing with height information. We're dealing with height information, and we're dealing with a mathematical information. So there's no need to change this into another color space. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose raw. Okay, so I like to just use raw and use that. Some people like to use roll mat. You can pick whichever one you want to do. The main thing is you don't want to convert this file. Okay, so I'm going to go and pipe this down in there. Boom. Okay, so I've got my height, I've got my normal map information for my displacement here, I've got my color here. Okay, don't have any other maps to wire in on this model. Unfortunately, it just came with these models. That's it. So we're good to go, man. We're doing pretty good here. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go ahead and kind of add and finish these things out, and then we'll finish up in Blender. Okay, so we're back. We've got everything wired up. We've got all of our materials wired up to our shader. So one quick thing, guys, before we move on, I just want to say I think I told you guys to use raw before for your normal maps. You can use raw. There's nothing wrong with it. Just to be consistent, I like to use utility raw, but you can use raw if you want to. Okay, you can actually use roll mat data and a couple other input transforms if you want to, but I like to stick with utility raw, so that's what we're using here for our normal map. Now the last thing we're going to talk about in Blender here, because if you want to go from here, if you're going to go into compositing and then to rendering, you just want to make sure like we said, we just want to make sure that we're outputting an ACESCG, because that way the exported files, the exported data files that you export out of the compositor, or the files that you export out of the 3D modeler through the render engine, are going to be put back into DaVinci, and the input transform in DaVinci is going to be ACESCG. Okay, so see how everything works together? Okay, so you just want to make sure you're doing that when you're rendering. So we're not going to cover that right now. The last thing I want to talk about in Blender is not really a Blender thing. This is a universal 3D application kind of thing. So as you saw there, it took me quite a bit of time. I had to go to each material and each material network and kind of wire up all this stuff and change the transform to what I want it to be. Now that's a tremendous amount of work. Like even for something, a tree like this, it's only got a couple nodes, it's still a lot of work. So what I want to do at this point is introduce you two guys to a wonderful tool called Image Color Space Converter. Now what that does is it's going to allow me to be able to batch transform a bunch of files. So let's say that I have a bunch of color files. I've made those color files in I've got a bunch of color files, and I've made these color files in Photoshop or some program like that. So I want to be able to take those color files and batch transform them into ACESCG. So when they're imported and they're placed inside of Blender, Blender will just automatically recognize them as ACESCG. They'll be set up, and we don't have to do a tremendous amount of work. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to drop them in the Image Color Space Converter, and I'm going to include the link for it, guys. This is a wonderful free tool that's on Gumroad, and if you can, support the guy who created it. His name is Liam Colad. Okay, so big shout out to Liam. Wonderful tool that he's developed here. It's an ongoing process. He's working on it constantly. So this is definitely something that you want to support. This is somebody we want to support on Gumroad, because he's making a wonderful tool that's going to help everybody, with their conversion of color files to the ACESCG format. So how do we do that in the image color space? So we're going to load in a bunch of files here. Okay. And we're going to take these files and we're going to do utility linear sRGB. Now we don't want that because none of these files have been linearized before. Okay, so we're going to change it to utility texture, and in our case we're going to change it to sRGB, because these are all sRGB files. Okay. And I'm going to apply that to all of these files. And you can see here now that they've all been tagged with sRGB texture format. Okay. Now we're going to change all of these files to EXR files. Okay. 16-bit half. We're going to use zip compression. We could use other compression if we wanted to. Okay. Sometimes I use the DWAB compression. It's the kind of compression that Netflix prefers, but for right now we use the zip compression. That's fine. Okay, we're going to do it to the same window, and our target color space is going to be ACESCG. Okay, so that's what we're aiming for here, ACESCG. Okay, so that's what we're going to do, and then we're going to process all of these files. Okay, that quick. Okay. And we process them into the same thing. So as you guys look here now, you'll see EXR files, and they're all processed. So that means that every one of these files has been processed. Okay. So I'm going to minimize this for a second. I'm going to go back to my trunk here. Okay. And let's zoom in on the trunk real quick so we can see what's happening there. Okay. So we're going to zoom in on the trunk, just so you guys can see what process is going on here. So here's our trunk JPEG. Here's the JPEG that we have for our trunk. Okay, so I'm going to make some room here. Okay. And I'm going to take the trunk node, the trunk SRG file that we created. I'm going to drop that in. Okay. Now, as you can see, this is utility sRGB texture. This is the ACESCG texture, and that's the tag that's been put on it. They input transformed it from Blender, but it's also the output transform that we did from Color Space, so they match up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one, I'm going to sit this guy off here, and I'm just going to wire this up to our color. And as you can see, we dragged and dropped the color in, and they're pretty much the same. Okay. So the transform, this is the Blender transform. This is ours taking the JPEG and transforming it to utility sRGB texture. And then this is an ACESCG transform that we did in Color Space. And if we wire them up, they look pretty much the same. They're right on target. So using Color Space will allow you to that quickly batch transform all of those color files and then drop them into Blender. You don't have to worry about wiring them up at that point. They'll come up as ACESCG. You wire them right into your color or whatever color node that you need to wire them into, and it's that easy, right? So I would strongly recommend follow the link I gave you. If you can, donate it a little bit to this guy's development fund. It's a useful tool. It's a great tool, and it doesn't just work with Blender. It works with Maya. It works with anything else that you can throw at as far as CG applications. Like I said, as we wind up Blender here, what you want to do is across the board from your whole total workspace, try to number one, linearize your workflow, but then number two, work in ACES, okay? Or, whatever gamut you're going to work in. So let's take ACES for right now. As you can see here, the workflow is going to be create textures, okay? Import those textures to be mapped onto your model. Render your model out in ACES, bring that into the compositor, work in ACES in your compositor, and then lastly, render that out to go back into your nonlinear finishing system, whether it be DaVinci or some other compositor or some other nonlinear editor that will accept ACES, okay? Because remember, Premiere doesn't work with ACES, okay? So that's our workflow. So what we want to do is kind of, as much as possible, automate that process. That's why the image color space converter, as I said, is a wonderful tool, because that's going to allow you to create these textures wherever they come from, whether they came from a photography camera or they came from some type of texturing program like Mari or Substance Painter. Now, talking about Mari, talking about Substance Painter, or even Photoshop. Okay, so let's bring Photoshop up real quick. So we have the bark here from Photoshop. Painter right now does not have a built-in support for Substance Painter. I'm talking about does not have a built-in support for ACES. There are a couple plugins out there, some wonderful plugins on Gumroad. If you go to Gumroad, type in ACES. They'll become available for you. You can use those, but they're kind of hacks, and they're right now. They get the job done, but not anything that I would call standard right now. It's still a work in progress, I think, from the artist that developed it. Mari, on the other hand, fully supports ACES. Okay, now that comes with the huge price tag for Mari, so let's just be honest about that. If you're planning on doing visual effects that you're going to put on Netflix, or visual effects that are going to go on some kind of streaming channel, and you want that vibrant color, you want the background and the foreground to match as far as lighting and everything, springing for a couple months of Mari is not a bad idea. Okay, I'm just going to say that. Buying the package on a monthly basis and paying those couple months for an artist, a Mari texture artist, to come in and do your models, that's not a bad deal if that's what you're looking at. If you're looking at Netflix or you're looking at Amazon. So there you go. Okay. We want to work consistently through the workflow in ACES, from creation of textures, uh, mapping textures onto models, rendering out to compositors in ACES, working in ACES in our compositing program, and then finally working in ACES in our nonlinear. Okay, it's that simple. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's that simple. Okay, so with that, we're going to end up here in Blender, a little bit of Photoshop, uh, uh, a little bit of a wonderful converter tool. Like I said, if you can go down, go on Gumroad, help this guy out, be greatly appreciated. But right now, while you're at it, I'd love to hear your comments on this, what you have to say. But while you're down there, like, subscribe, hit the notification button. You know the deal. I think there's a lot of wonderful stuff here. I haven't heard many more people talk about this in ACES, and especially workflow in this manner. Hopefully you guys are finding this to be useful. If you are, by all means, man, help me out. Hit that like, subscribe, and share it out to people. Share it to people in your community, okay? Because I think this is some information that unfortunately I have to tell all my friends all the time on a one-to-one basis. That's why I started this channel, because I want to be able to just give this information to people en masse. Okay, all right. We're going to move over to Fusion real quick, and then we're going to wind up part 2, and we're going to be on the part 3, which is going to be Maya and After Effects. Okay, all right. So we're over in Blackmagic Fusion. And continuing what we're talking about before, we are now going to actually show some workflow and how ACES, doing ACES in a 3D program, and also doing ACES as far as generating your filmed plates, okay, your backgrounds. It can be integrated together inside of Fusion. Okay, so. What you have here right now is a plate I quickly comped together. This was from a previous film I had, and I can show you guys, if you go on my Instagram, you can see the before and afters. I'm going to post those so you can kind of see the before and after in the comp, and how when I did this film 6 years ago, I used a linear process. I actually processed all the 3D stuff was done in Maya, in V-Ray, but it was a linear process, okay? This actually, it was done in V-Ray on Maya. I actually did this quickly last night, but I processed every one of the textures through ACES. So you can automatically see right here, you're getting a lot more fidelity and a lot more, it matches a lot better to the comp. And that kind of goes back to what we talked about in part 1. And if you haven't, once again, if you guys have not gone over to part 1, go over to part 1, watch part 1, so you can kind of understand what I'm talking about here. One of the main identifiers you see in bad VFX, and there's a lot of reasons for bad VFX, but one of the main identifiers for bad VFX is the fact that the process is shorter, right? And a lot of the times it's not because the artists don't know what they're doing. Most of the artists do know what they're doing. These guys are pros. They operate at a high level. It's the time frame. It's producers, which in our lexicon we call pros. It's the producers, it's the money, it's the time frame. They're squeezed to try to get it done, and the guys just do the best that they can. And when I mean guys and gals, they do the best job that they can. So one of the things that gets left out of that process is linearizing textures. So when you see bad, I don't want to call it bad, when you see a budget conscious film that has not very good VFX, one of the first things that goes is that they comp it in the program of the day. Most of the time that's After Effects, and After Effects is not, After Effects in linear is okay, but After Effects in something like ACES is, and we'll go through this, we'll do that in part 3. We'll go through After Effects, and you guys will see what I'm talking about as far as how difficult it is to actually work in ACES, and another color space other color spaces along with that in After Effects. Okay, but right now we're in Fusion. As a lot of you guys know, I tout Fusion as being the best compositor for independent film. Okay, Not that it's better than Nuke. Nuke is awesome. Nuke is what you should use. But if you're an independent filmmaker and you're just trying to get your film done and you're on a tight budget, Nuke is not really an option for you. Okay, Nuke is a lot of money. Fusion is free or $2.99. Okay, and almost everything you need to get done in a compositor for an independent film, Fusion can do. Okay, so we're over in Fusion now. Enough of that right there. We'll talk about that later, and I'll talk about that on Instagram. If you haven't already gone up to my Instagram, do me a favor, go to my Instagram, follow me on there. You're going to get little nuggets on why I think Fusion is the best and what some of the things that you can do on Fusion. And we're going to feature Fusion a lot more in the things that are coming up. But for right now, I want to show you ACES and Fusion, show what the workflow is, and kind of go from there. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start from scratch. I'm just actually going to start with reading in this file. So I'm going to read in this file. And as I said, this is a Maya export in ACESCG from V-Ray. Okay, so that's our output from Maya in ACESCG. So the very first thing I want to do is we're going to follow the same workflow that we did in Blender and the same workflow that we did in DaVinci. First thing we're going to do is drop an IDT. Okay, so we're going to get that IDT in here. Okay, so we're going to find OCIO color space, and we're going to drop that. Okay, so we're going to drop that color flow. Now we know when we output it from Maya, we did it as ACESCG. Okay. And now what we want to do here, like a lot of people say, well, we're already working in ACES. This is an ACES file. Why don't we just leave it as ACES? No, what we want to do is we're going to kind of take this a little bit more toward the log format. So I'm going to take this to ACESCG, okay? And I'm going to show this as ACESCG in my in my render, okay? So I'm going to pop that right here, and we're showing that on the view screen. That was a just hitting the 2 buttons. So this is the second monitor, our right monitor. And now as you can see, ACESCG has kind of converted that, converted the soldier into a logarithmic kind of look for us. So that's what we want to do because we're going to be working in log space with our background plate, which was shot on a Canon C300. Okay. So I'm converted it over. All right. Now, I want to do my color correction. I want to do whatever I need to do to this, to this plate. Okay. So I'm going to drop a color node. Okay. For instance, so we'll take a color node. Now, here comes where you have some options, right? You have some options as far as working with ACES. Now, you can take this out to a view LUT and drop a view LUT down, and you're still working at ACESCG. When we output, we're gonna output this back into ACESCG or ACESCG. We're gonna take that because we're gonna put this back into Resolve. Okay, so but we want to see right now what we're doing as far as color correction. Right? We want to see color correction because I'm on a Rec 709 monitor. Okay, remember that. Or if you're in an sRGB monitor, what you want to do is you want to convert this over so you can actually see this in that space. Now, there's 2 ways to do that. One, and this is what I prefer to do, is I'm going to drop another node. Okay, I'm going to drop another color space node. And I'm going to take this color space mode and I'm going to convert it back from ACESCG, and I'm going to convert it down. We're going to go output Rec 709. Okay. And I'm going to hit 2 and I'm going to take a look at it. So now I've taken my OpenEXLR output, 16-bit. I've taken that, converted it to ACESCG. I'm going to do my color correction or anything else I need to do in here. So if there's anything else like colors, anything else I need to do as far as some gain and work that I need to do, I'm going to do it here. And then at the end, I'm going to drop that color space node and take it out to Rec 709 so I could look at it. Okay. Now, theoretically, if I've done everything correctly and everything looks great and I'm happy with it, then I'm just going to drop a saver node. Okay. I'm going to drop that saver node and I'm going to output it. Okay. All right. So we're going to leave that blank for right now because that's not what we want to do. Okay. Now, here's the thing, really important. Once you get everything to the way you like it in Rec 709, okay, so I'm working in Rec 709 space. I'm going to go and do my color correction. I get everything the way I like it in that color space. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this output here. I'm going to change this to what I want to bring into DaVinci. Very important. I'm going to change that output color space and I'm going to take it to something that I want to use in DaVinci. So let's say I want to go to ACESCG. That's what I'm going to convert this to ACESCG, and then my saver node is going to save out an ACESCG file. That's my comps. My comps are going to go out as ACESCG, or they're going to go out at whatever space that I'm working, whatever ACES space I'm working in Resolve. And you can go back to further in this, to the beginning of this video, if you don't know what I'm talking about as far as working in Resolve, okay? But that's very important. Make sure that you can get, once you finish your comp, you finish your work, that you take this out, okay? And back out to what you're going to save it as. Don't leave it as Rec 709 because then you're basically going to squash everything down into Rec 709. It's not going to do you any good. And actually, I'll show you examples between working in ACES and working in just regular linear Rec 709 later in a second. So, all right. So this is basically the workflow. I get in here. I'm gonna go, gain up, gain down. Work with my contrast. That's what I'm going to do. So I don't do my color correction. I'll kind of color it out. I might even drop a film grain node here. Okay, so we might grab a film grain and plop a little film grain to match what I have going on already in the piece. I actually wouldn't put too much on there, but for effect, so you guys can see what's happening, we'll drop some film grain in there. Okay, so that's the workflow. Okay, raw file in, color space correction, do your work, color space correction out, and send to be rendered. Okay, almost the same exact workflow as Blender, Maya 3D program, what have you, and the same as Resolve. Okay, now, so we've got that. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you a finished composite that I did really quickly. And, we're going to switch over and take a look at that. Okay, so this is the finished composite. We saw it before. And we'll just zip through this really quickly. This is my comp. We saw that before. Open the XLR into the space we want to use. Then we're going to go into, as you can see, it's going to open, we're going to change it to CC. Okay. Now, what I did here is I actually did some color correction, so you can see that being applied. And a little hue change and some color correction. Okay. Now, the reason for that color correction is because I introduced a plate, and this is the original plate from a couple years ago, C300. Shout out to my girl, Justine Greenwald, great actress here. If you haven't seen my film, Seeing Tomorrow, well, now it's called Nina Blue, Seeing Tomorrow. If you haven't seen that, catch it on, I think it was on Netflix, and now it's going to be on Prime coming up. I think you can catch it on Redbox and Vudu and all that kind of stuff. Bottom line, it's out there. But there was another robot here. We're actually going to update this film, so I'm going to put a new robot in. I don't know if it's going to be this robot here. I did this really quick for you guys, but there's going to be a new robot, updated art, CG, the whole deal. So, and we're going to do it in the ACES workflow. We're going to do it in the ACES workflow. Once again, follow me on Instagram for updates on that. When I, as I think through my process of how I'm going to upgrade this film with new 3D art. We're using real-time graphics for that in Unreal, so it gives us a lot better chance to be able to exploit a lot of different scenes that, 6 years ago I couldn't dream of fitting in on an independent budget. So it's going to be really fun. If you get a chance, like I said, follow me on Instagram. Feel free to ask questions, engage. Like always, guys, down in the comment section, if you have questions on this, just hit me up. Okay, so as you see here, okay, I've got my plate. This is our plate, and this was rendered out as DPX files. Okay, so these are DPX render out. As you guys can see there, it's a DPX render out, Canon C300 log C daylight. Okay. So I'm going to take it over into color space, and here you go right here. You have your source space, which is input Canon log, and it's going to be a Rec 709 daylight space. Okay, I'm going to take the output space and convert it to ACES CCT. Okay, why am I going ACES CCT instead of ACES CC? Okay, and I'll show you guys. Okay, not that much change. But the ACES CCT, if you guys remember, right? If you remember, is what we used in DaVinci, okay? So what I want to do is kind of match those transforms if I can. But it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna, even if I change this to CCT, as you guys can see, the image didn't change. So I could stay with ACES CC here. Let's just do that. I'm going to go to my color correction. I'm going to add a bit of color correction to it. All right, just to get it into the space where I want it to go. Now, remember, at the end of the road here, at the end of my road, I have an ACES CC to Rec 709 output. So this is what's giving me this look here, because I'm color correcting for Rec 709. Okay. I'm taking the image and I'm color correcting for Rec 709. That's why this image looks the way it is. Then I have a merge, right? So I'm just doing a simple merge and gonna merge everything together. And as you can see here, I have I've got both of them in the same, they look the same as far as the space, okay? And right now, that's just basically, you can use some eyedroppers. I like to use the histogram, kind of make sure my histograms match up. And then basically, I'm just normalizing. I'm looking at it and saying, okay, the light on the forehead. This is the lightest part of the robot. Here's some lightness here. The face, the background over here, which is really yellow, and it kind of matches the yellow over here. I'm just matching stuff up as far as tone and how it all looks. Okay. And then once I merge, then I'm going to go ahead and kind of introduce some color as far as taking these guys and saying, okay, hey, you know what? Do I have to add a little bit of saturation, which I did here. You guys can watch that. There's saturation here, so I'm making it a little bit more saturated. Okay. And then finally, I'm taking it back to Rec 709. Okay. Which changes it drastically, introduces that look that we're looking for. So this is what you want to work with. You want to keep your monitor kind of set for that Rec 709 and then do all your changes based on that. So if I'm going up here, I'm going to mess with the hue curves for the robot. I'm going to do it while watching the open color Rec 709. I'm going to do it while I'm doing that, because that's going to be my output in Rec 709. Okay. And like I said, at the end of this, what you want to do is change this over, change it back to CCT, change it back to CC, whatever you're going to input it as in Resolve, that's what you're going to render out as, okay? It's pretty simple, right? Pretty simple. Now, what we're going to do is, I've got this plate here, and then what I'm going to do, I've got another plate where I've kind of taken this and converted, I've kind of taken this and converted it into, I've kind of converted this whole little thing into 8-bit, an 8-bit, an 8-bit sRGB workflow. So this is normally what, like a lot of you guys, and even in my previous life, I used to do. Right? I'd get into Maya, I'd render out to PNG, I render out to JPEG, I render out to anything I could as far as just rendering my models out, because speed was of the essence, number one. Then number two, as long as it looked good on my screen, that's what I cared about, right? So that's what I did here. I converted the OpenEXR, it took it, converted it to sRGB space. I changed the bit depth on it from 16-bit down to 8-bit, okay? So now it's an 8-bit image, okay? I've got some color correction in here. Now, I don't have any color correction applied now because, as you can see, it would take a little bit to work with this image and get it where I need it to be. This is actually the render crushed down to 8-bit and changed to sRGB. So that's what this is here, okay? Hue curves haven't applied any of those, so we don't have any of those locked in yet. Color curves, haven't done anything like that yet. Those things would have to be applied later to try to get this image to where this needs to be, okay? Same thing here. I took the DPX files, 16-bit DPX files, converted them over to sRGB, and then crushed the depth down to 8-bit, okay? So I'm going in 8-bit workflow. This is, you know, as about as, you know, normal, straight out the box as you possibly can do. So this is 8-bit across 8-bit, no color correction yet. Well, here I've got some color correction. I mimicked what I did on the other one. So what I did was I mimicked the, best I could, I mimicked the curve that I had over here at 16-bit. I mimicked it over here. And as you can see, if you look really close, they're off. You can see it's off already. Okay, there's a lot of latitude here in this image, a lot of added latitude up here. This is already showing signs of being blown out. The forehead is definitely on the peak of being blown out. Okay, so this image is, to me, this image right here is kind of in danger of breaking, because you can see, you can look at the highlights here of the hair, and there's just a lot going on. Okay, and as you can see right here, guys, in this example, I don't have saturation turned on. There's no saturation turned on at all. I've got some contrast here, okay, but if you guys, if you look over here, I've got more contrast, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so if I'm here, this is contrast for this image, for the background plate, for this, okay? That's contrast for the background plate. In that background plate, you're gonna see that there's, you know, there's a lot of contrast going on, okay? There's a lot of stuff going on as far as, okay, hey, you know, okay, let me plus this up real quick here. Okay. So there's a lot of latitude still here. Okay, if you look here, I've got the contrast cranked up to 2.84. Okay, so I've got the contrast cranked up pretty high, and you're not breaking the image. You still got fidelity. You still got a lot of fidelity in the hair, a lot of fidelity, and a lot of, you can still see a lot what's going on in the darkness. And then even here, the highlights, the hair, it's not blown out. The forehead still reads. You're not breaking the image in the background. You've got a lot to work with here, okay? Whereas when you get here, okay, right? I'm just at this point, what I'm doing is I'm just changing the images. So we're going back and monitor, left monitor, right monitor for the images. Okay, so this is the actual sRGB monitor. As you can see, this is on the verge of breaking. I think this is on the verge of breaking already. And as you guys can see, the contrast is set to 1.22. So the contrast here, the latitude of what it would take, and I'm going to crank this up to 2.84 and you'll see what happens. Okay, so I'm not even at 2.84 and I'm gone. It's gone. Okay. This is the advantage of working in ACES. Okay. This image, if I take this image and I start to gain up, I'm losing it. Okay. If I gain down, and as you guys can see the highlights, and if you look really closely, you can see the highlights of the image here and how it's reading and how it goes up. And you see here, the robot is still is kind of the latitude on the robot is totally different. How it's reading and blowing out is totally not like film. It's not reading like film, where you're getting a more filmatic response from the thing that was actually shot on from the Canon footage, which was shot on a camera. And that goes back to what we talked about in part 1. All right. Here, okay, so we're going to go here. So here, if we gain up, okay. All right, we're going to pull this one up, guys. All right, so here you can already see the subtleties, how subtle the picture is, how the picture looks a lot more filmatic already. But if I gain up, I gain down and gain up. Okay, you see how both of them are now responding the same way? They both reach their points at the same time. Both of them are reading and they're both performing the same way. They've got their curves are the same way. Okay? That's because both of them are working in ACES. Both of these pieces are working in ACES. Okay, so I'm going to get the CG model that's going to react a lot more like the film model. So it's gonna react a lot more like my camera footage. Okay, because I'm gonna gamma up here. Okay. Get a little bit more brightness, and as you can see, I got a lot more latitude. I lost the highlights in the forehead, but that's stuff that I would do over in DaVinci. That's when I got into DaVinci, those are things I would do over in DaVinci. I wouldn't try to attack this in Fusion. Okay, you can do that. You know, you can do a little bit more precise color grading in Nuke. Maybe dodge and burn in After Effects, but you could do it here too, but I wouldn't do that here. What I would do if I'm going to do finite color correction, what I want to do here is just make sure that this plate, this CG plate and the actual background plate are in the same space. They're in the same space and they're behaving the same way. And I've got myself in a primary kind of point in the same part. So I'm concerned about the color here, what I have going on as far as the highlights and how the highlights are reacting to each other. I've got highlights here and here that kind of match my highlight here. I've got color here that's kind of matching up here. Yeah, and this was about an hour this morning, guys. So I'm not saying it's finished. I'm saying it shows you what you can do using ACES and the ACES linear approach rather than sRGB, which is like, I would, like hope it's not what 95% of the people are doing. But, like unfortunately for a lot of us, this is where we came from. We came from, this world. We came from this world here, okay? And in this world here, if I do the same thing, I hit the gamma, I'm going to blow out differently. It's going to respond differently. I'm going to end up in different places. But as always, man, it's different tastes. This is ACES. What it gives you, the benefit it gives you, because I've got a lot of work to do with this. I mean, just to get this to where it kind of matches up with what's going on here, because this is color. And I didn't use color. I didn't use color temperature with my Maya render. So I'm just getting white lights, and then whatever I got from my HDRI dome. So got a lot of work to do to match this environment. Okay, even if this environment is going to get color corrected to be a little bit more neutral, I'm still got a lot of work to do here. Okay, and ordinarily this would have got neutralized, then brought in, and then this would match up a little bit more favorably with that. And that should have happened in Resolve. It didn't. We didn't use Resolve. We actually used Speed Grade, which got absorbed by Adobe. And this neutralizing of this plate happened over there. This is the raw plate. This is the raw C-Log Canon plate. So this would definitely need to be colored. Like we'd have to do some color work on this, do some color correction, get this color corrected correctly, then bring it into Maya as a plate. Do your animation, animate this character like we did before, and then render this character out, bring it back into Fusion here, and this plate would have been colored. That way we could color this plate forward. Okay. Quick work last night, guys, but that's the process. All right, so this is it for part 2. As I told you guys, I'm going to do Maya and After Effects. Maya and After Effects we're going to do in part 3 because this is a long workflow and tutorial. But I'm hope that this is helping you guys as far as explaining the process, making it easier for you to implement this into your workflow to help get your films done. It's the middle of the summer. People are out shooting. Everybody's is anxious because last year was such a a screeched chalkboard of history. So everybody's anxious right now to get their projects out, get their content out. I hope this is going to help you to make your project better, to realize your vision a little bit more. That's why I'm here. Remember, guys, like, subscribe. Down in the comment section, leave me some feedback on whether or not this is helpful or not. It's a long video. Like I said, we put links in there. Jump to the links if you need them. Use it as reference material, man. I hope this helps you to get done what you need to get done. Part 3, a couple days. Got it 30% done right now. I'm gonna finish it off probably tonight. It'll be up soon. So Maya After Effects wrap up will be part 3. This has been part 2 of the ACES workflow for independent filmmakers. I'm your boy, JEM, Mighty Hova. You know what it is. Niham. Peace.